Good morning, John Muchler here, pastor at the Ferndale Alliance Church. And how about a title this morning for our message? And how about getting away with murder? ? We are in the second half of Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount, and there's this pivot verse, an important pivot point right in the middle, right after the Beatitudes, where Jesus says, this is in verse 20, "Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, unless you out-Pharisee the Pharisees, we might say, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." And then Jesus goes on and he gives us 6 situations, actually 6 Old Testament verses or sayings or commandments. And he has this 3-part pattern where he says, you've heard this or you've read this, and he reads a commandment or recites a commandment. Then he has the second part where he says, but I say to you, where he's going to then expand upon the Old Testament commandment. He doesn't contradict it. He doesn't dismiss it. He doesn't say it doesn't count anymore, but he says, I'm going to explain what was really meant here. And the third part is he radicalizes that commandment into something more profound, more deep, to truly what God had intended. And we've already seen some of the examples. We read through them a few days ago. You know, committing adultery, that's bad, but playing out adultery in your mind is just as bad. Committing murder, it's bad, but having murder in your heart is bad as well. So we're going to look at each of those 6 situations, beginning with the first one, which is about murder. And can we all agree? Any disagreement? Murder is bad. So our text is going to simply be Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26, dealing with murder. So murder is wrong. Premeditated murder is wrong. That is different than killing in self-defense, or if you're in the armed services and we are protecting our country and we kill people sometimes. But murder, pure and simply, is wrong. Can we all agree that murder means that somebody's life, hopes, dreams, aspirations, opportunities have been robbed of him or her? And more so, those that knew and loved that person have been wronged and robbed to a level that's indescribable, and perhaps more cruel to them than any punishment that could possibly be inflicted upon the murderer. If you would, I still think daily of George Floyd. In Minneapolis on May 25th, his life robbed from him by a police officer. I am not going to canonize Mr. Floyd. He certainly was not all saint, like all of us, you and me, a mixture of both good and bad, but nothing that he had done that day or had done previously warranted him being strangled at the knee of an officer sworn to serve and protect. I have fought here in Whatcom County for decades about Mandy Stavick, 18 years old. I've got 3 daughters who have been 18 years old and a 4th quickly heading that direction. An 18-year-old college student, the day after Thanksgiving in 1989, she was abducted, violated, hit on the head, thrown in the river, and killed near the community of Acme, Washington. You know what was unique about it was it stunned everybody because it was such an odd thing to have happen. And if there's any bright side to that, is things like that occur extremely rarely in most communities, and certainly more rural communities like Whatcom County. But it took 30 years, and God bless the Sheriff's Department for sticking with it. It took 30 years to track down the person. Tim Bass is his name, and get a conviction and put him away in jail for hopefully the rest of his life. But how is this justice? How does this repair things? Because murder just does terrible damage, not just to the victim, which of course is the ultimate damage, but to those that love and care. So we're all going to agree here, aren't we, that murder is wrong. It's terribly wrong, and always requires the most severe of consequences and punishment. But here's the deal. Jesus is going to warn us. He's going to warn us that our emotions, our words, our emotions like anger, our words, our offenses are like murder. Even our looks sometimes, you know the phrase, if looks could kill, if looks could kill. And so I want to simply today read our passage. And I want you to note the number of times that Jesus, not old John here, not Pastor John here, Jesus equates in his eyes and in God's eyes that murder takes place at a lot of different levels than just actually literally taking someone's life, okay? Your beef is not with me, it's going to be with Jesus. So here's the point. A few of us, I trust, listening today have literally committed actual murder or manslaughter. We read the sixth commandment, you shall not commit murder. We kind of look at it and we move on. And Jesus is saying to us, don't just check off that box. Stop and think about what's going on there. Why is that even a commandment in the first place? Jesus is saying, hold on a minute. I want you to think about what's really here because it's important. So we are going to look at our passage today, again, Matthew 5, 21 through 26. We're going to look at 5 situations. One is rather uncommon, literal murder, but the other 4 situations are actually pretty common even in church life, even in the life of a believer. Okay, let's do that together. Starting at verse 21. Once again, we all agree that murder is wrong. Murder is bad. It says in verse 21, you have heard it was said long ago, you shall not commit murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. No disagreement there. We all agree that murder is bad, murder is wrong. But the second common situation, second situation would be the first common situation really, is anger. People that are unreasonably or wrongly angry towards somebody. Here's what it says. And note that the consequences are basically the same. I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Wow, anger. We will come back to this, by the way. It's important to know we're not going to leave you hanging. We will look at each one and we're going to insist and show and prove. These are actually rather liberating things for us if we understand them correctly. Let's go on to the next situation, which is name calling. Name calling is also bad and wrong and treated the same as, I kid you not, murder. Again, you don't have, your argument's not with me. Your beef is with Jesus here. Here's the second half of verse 22. Anyone who says to his brother or sister, Raka. What's the best translation for Raka? Quite frankly, I think it's the word dork. You're a dork. Or if anyone says to someone, you fool, or you dummy, he will be in danger of the fire of hell. Whoa, Jesus seems to one up it here. The consequences for name calling seem to be worse than the consequences for murder. We might talk about that later, but I think that's significant. So we're going to take this very seriously, why we shouldn't be name calling. Here's the next situation. It's when we needlessly and inappropriately, which is most of the time, offend people, when we offend people and not make it right. And the punishment here seems to be exclusion from worship, exclusion from participating in the life of the place of worship or church or synagogue or whatever. Listen to these words beginning at verse 23. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar, go first and be reconciled to them, and then come back, offer your gift, and participate in the body of worship there. The last situation we find is basically something that people find themselves increasingly stuck in. That's in a lawsuit with somebody, in a legal jeopardy with somebody. You're suing somebody or somebody is suing you. And this is what Jesus says about that. He says, settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, Or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be dragged into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. I realize you might think, what does that all mean? We're going to look at that. We're going to look at legal jeopardy, lawsuits, and getting sued and things like that. So the main point, of course, is this. Murder in God's eyes covers a lot more things than just actually going out and knocking somebody off. It really does. And we're going to look at that together. And again, I want you to know that a proper understanding of these principles, Jesus' radicalization of the simple commandment, thou shalt not murder, actually brings great liberty to us, those that we love, those that we know, those that we hang out with. So hang in there, and we'll explore each of these over the next few days. We'll see you next time.